Really quickly guys, check out our month-long Black Friday sale over at Fantasy Sabers, where we're giving away a free Chosen One Deluxe with every Saber purchase. These are the best Sabers on the market, so don't miss out.
What if Darth Vader betrayed Sidious immediately after Order 66? Let's start the story during the night of Revenge of the Sith. Anakin had completely sacked the Jedi Temple, and he alongside the clones had been successful in exterminating everyone inside. Palpatine brings Anakin back to his office, and instead of sending him to Mustafar, he decides to keep him close by as he senses danger through the Force. After completing Order 66, Anakin feels very strong in the dark side. He feels invincible and strong enough that he can now learn the power to save Padme. He thinks about Palpatine, asking himself if he really needs him. He claimed to be the only one with the knowledge to save Padme, but he doesn't actually know the secret to transcend death, only his master did. He's by his side as he has these thoughts, and the Force speaks to him, urging Anakin to act on them and betray his master. But before Anakin decided to act, they were confronted by two Jedi, Obi-Wan and Yoda. They had broken into the Senate building, determined to destroy the Empire before it could begin. Palpatine and Anakin ignited their blades and confronted the two Jedi. The battle was glorious. 4 of the strongest Force users in the galaxy. Sith lightning ricocheted across the battlefield. Yoda leapt across the room, his lightsaber a green blur. Anakin pressed forward, his rage fueling him in the fight, whilst Obi-Wan, the master of Form 3, carefully defended Anakin's strikes and strategically sent his own back. However, the tide of the battle changed when Sidious successfully caught Yoda with Sith lightning, and he took advantage of the momentary lapse by cutting Yoda's lightsaber arm off. The Grand Master screamed in pain, whilst Anakin brought his saber down on Obi-Wan's lightsaber, destroying the hilt and sent him flying back with the Force. The two Jedi staggered to their feet, wounded, as Palpatine commanded Anakin that their time to end the Jedi is now. They rushed forward, ready to deal the killing blow, as Yoda stretched out his hand and sent both Sith flying back with the Force. As they returned to their feet, they looked up and the Jedi were gone. Palpatine turned to Anakin and told him it does not matter, their time will come. But Anakin looks at Palpatine, the dark side in his eyes, and tells his master that he failed. Palpatine senses the betrayal and throws his lightsaber at Anakin, who uses the Force to block as he stabs with his own, penetrating Palpatine's chest and killing the Emperor, telling them that he no longer has any use for him. He has the power to save Padme himself. Mas Amida walks in as Palpatine's body slumps to the floor. He and Anakin make eye contact and are silent for a second until Amida bends his knee and declares his loyalty to Anakin. The Empire is his. The clone army is his. Anakin addresses the Senate after, declared that Palpatine has been overthrown, that he would have destroyed the galaxy through the Empire, but in his place, he, Anakin Skywalker, will become the new Emperor and lead the galaxy to prosperity. There were some cheers, some voices of disdain. Anakin was liked, the hero of the Jedi and Republic, but they didn't have a choice. The clone army was under his control, and therefore, he was their Emperor. Meanwhile, whilst Anakin was doing this, Obi-Wan and Yoda went to Padme's home. They begged her to come with them, that it wasn't safe for her on Coruscant. Anakin was gone. Vader had taken over. They talked her through all the horrifics that Anakin had committed, and Padme couldn't believe it, but they successfully convinced her to come with them. But as they were leaving, Anakin came into the apartment, and he saw Padme leaving with the Jedi. He couldn't believe it. How could she betray him like this, especially when he's done all of this for her? He reaches out with the Force, aiming to stop the ship and grab anyone, but he accidentally force chokes Padme, and the Jedi try to pull her on board. Yoda throws his lightsaber at Anakin, which forces him to stop his choke, and the Jedi successfully take Padme away, but she collapses unconscious, however, still alive. They reach Polis Massa, where Padme enters labor. However, Obi-Wan and Yoda didn't expect what the droids told them, that she was in fact dying. The sadness that she had, her loss of Anakin was too much for her will, and she passed away shortly after giving birth to Luke and Leia. After Padme escaped, Anakin put out an order for her capture in the Empire. He wanted her back, not only because he loved her, but because she would be giving birth soon, and he needed to be there to ensure she survived. However, reports came in that she had died, which broke Anakin's heart completely. He had failed, not only her, but also her children. In his mind, his nightmares had come true, all along, and he had failed. Anakin went to the funeral held on Naboo, and murmurs scattered through the crowd as Anakin, the new Emperor, began walking down the ceremony. He walks with Padme's family, tears down his eyes, and vows he will make the Jedi pay. He brings Padme's body back to Coruscant and decides he will build a stone memorial for her. He spends some time with her before he buries her casket, but something catches his eye. He puts his hand on her belly and reaches out with the Force and realizes that he can't sense their fallen child in there. This stuns Anakin. He hadn't even considered that his child might have survived, but this means Yoda and Obi-Wan must have them. His rage rises and declares to Padme's body that he will get their child back safely. Over the following weeks, Anakin begins establishing the Empire. He takes over the Jedi Temple to become his base of operations, with Padme's memorial out front. He takes over Palpatine's network of spies and operatives, including Sabers, and they begin implementing Palpatine's early plans for the Empire. He continues Order 66, and one day, a temple guard came to him and declared that he had been working with Palpatine before his death, and now wanted to do so with Emperor Anakin. Skywalker permitted this, and named him the Grand Inquisitor, and together they started the Inquisitorius program, recruiting fallen Jedi to help them carry out Order 66. Anakin now had full access to the Jedi Archive's restricted section and Sith holocrons. He begins studying them and becomes proficient in many dark-side techniques: Sith Lightning, Deadly Sight, Force Domination. But Anakin's main focus was to find his child. He read about a Sith ritual in one of the holocrons and begins meditating in the Force. He uses a strand of Padme's hair for the DNA match and begins to use this to help locate his child. He focuses on the hair, its DNA combined with his own, and pours his Force energy into it until the Force shows him an answer: Alderaan. He goes immediately and storms into the home of Bail Organa, declaring that he must know where his child is, that he would have been with Padme at the very end. Bail goes to deny this as his wife walks in, carrying their adopted child Leia. Anakin couldn't believe it, pushes Bail back with the Force, and uses the Force to bring Leia into his arms. He looks down at her face. She was just like her mother Padme, and sees her in Leia. Their baby can now carry on Padme's memory through her, and she can become everything Padme would have wanted. He takes Leia back to the temple, and little did Skywalker know, Leia would be his pull back to the light. After spending days with his child, he was reminded of Padme and her memory, thinking about what she would have wanted for Leia in her future, and it wouldn't have been to become a ruthless Sith Lord and an enforcer of the Empire. This is where Anakin realizes his philosophy of the Force must change. The dark side has been helpful in establishing his power, but ultimately it has failed him. Palpatine's promises and way of thinking were lies. The dark side never gave him the power to save Padme, and Palpatine fed him false promises of being the only one who could save her. And Anakin now realizes that these were lies, and he may never have been able to. The dark side cannot fully be the answer, but neither is solely the light. Leia was the pullback to the light that Anakin needed, and slowly he moved away from complete darkness. The Empire's control of the galaxy was strong, and instead of decommissioning the clones, he worked with Kamino to increase the production of a new batch, but he had them altered. He reduced the amount of personality that the clones would have so that they were better at following orders. Master Amida and Saint Pistage gave Anakin the plans for the Death Star, and a few years later, it began production. Anakin's takeover of the galaxy was swift and unopposed, but little did Anakin know this was on purpose. For 18 years, he had little pushback, minor skirmishes that were quickly overcome by sending a small portion of his forces. He searched far and wide for Kenobi and Yoda, but he could never find them, and this was because they were in hiding. They had grouped together on Dagobah and set up their own base on the planet. Instead of hiding away like they did in the original timeline, they decided to actively take a role in restoring the Jedi Order, and this is because they had Luke and started to train him in the Force. They also worked alongside Senators, Mon Mothma, and many others to try and find surviving Jedi around the galaxy. When they did this, they were sent to Dagobah. Over these 18 years, they had built a fairly strong force, finding 70 surviving Jedi of Order 66. They also found what Force sensitives they could to train as Padawans in the Order. The initial loss of Leia was problematic, however they still had Luke. Obi-Wan and Yoda trained him personally, and he was far stronger than they had ever expected. Obi-Wan realizing that this is how powerful Anakin would have been if he was trained from birth. Everything about the Force came easy to Luke, and his raw connection only matched that of Anakin. He was a master of all 7 forms of lightsaber combat, and at 16, could beat Yoda and Obi-Wan in a duel. In the meantime, rebels in the Senate, such as Mon Mothma, Garm Bel Iblis, Tyrone Pamo, and Fang Zar, just to name a few, were working on the rebel movement. They tried to gather as many high-profile rebel sympathizers to their cause, to procure funds, infrastructure, weapons, and ships for their cause. When Luke reached his 18th birthday, Obi-Wan and Yoda were pleased with his training. He was a strong Jedi and ready to take on his father. However, they didn't tell Luke that Anakin or Leia were his family, believing this would hold him back. However, this mistake might prove to be fatal. Meanwhile, Leia had grown to be a strong and proficient Force user. Anakin trained her himself from the day she had shown signs of her powers. He trained her in both light and dark sides of the Force, and she picked them up quickly. He trained her not only in the Force, but to become his equal in the Empire. She was his daughter and legacy, the child of Padme, and one day would inherit the Empire for herself. She had become the second in command on her 16th birthday, when she mastered both light and dark sides of the Force. She was the main spokesperson in the Senate, dishing out orders and commands to the various worlds and systems. Anakin only showed his face a couple of times a year, when the topic was of utmost importance. Anakin and Leia loved each other dearly. They discussed Padme a lot, and Anakin told her that her mother would be proud with what she had become, that she was everything she would have hoped for. Their empire was strong and unbreakable, until the day when the Reformed Jedi Order attacked. The rumbles of rebel movement had been a distant nuance for years, but Anakin dismissed their initial strikes against remote Imperial outposts and patrol ships. However, Anakin realized this was a genuine threat when the attacks evolved and the rebels started attacking supply lines and Imperial bases. But what made Anakin realize he really needed to get involved was when reports started coming in that the Jedi were leading the rebel forces. The Jedi Order had returned, and they were a threat to the Empire. Anakin mobilizes the entire Inquisitorius, 100 members, and they begin attacking the rebel forces directly. All-out war erupted, as Anakin led his flagship, the Executor, and directed squadrons of Star Destroyers to hunt down the rebels. He and Leia would fight and descended upon the rebels together. The rebels and Jedi fought intelligently. They were ghosts, masters of guerrilla warfare. They struck down Imperial garrisons in under 10 minutes, ambushed patrols in the dead of night, and vanished into asteroid fields before the Empire could respond. For every base in the Empire fortified, the rebels sabotaged 2 more as their network of sympathizers in the Empire began to grow. Obi-Wan and Yoda were happy with how it was going, but they knew they were only biding their time. They needed to draw Anakin out to have him face Luke in battle. They begin implementing their plan, which they believe will tip Anakin off emotionally and make him act out of emotion rather than logic and lure him into their trap. The rebels, through their sympathetic senators, released a doctored recording around the HoloNet. They advertised this as a rediscovered, full-length holographic speech made by Padme Amidala, the deceased wife of Emperor Skywalker. The speech was profoundly anti-imperial and pro-democratic. It stated that if the galaxy ever fell into dictatorship rule, she urged the people to raise arms and fight out against those who had taken their freedom. The recording ended by saying a galaxy ruled by fear is a galaxy already lost. True strength lies in our compassion, not only our power to destroy. The recording played for days across the galaxy. This was embarrassing for Anakin, and it enraged him profoundly. Leia confronted him, asking if this is true. Is this what Padme really wanted? But Anakin told her this was propaganda by the rebels, in an attempt to divide them. The video had its intended effect, and Anakin was furious. He wanted to find the people who released the video and bring them to justice. He used the tech department of the Empire to trace back the origins of the recording. It was encrypted and took time, but eventually found the source, a remote warehouse on the planet of Dantooine. Anakin and Leia went immediately, alongside 10 Inquisitors and an entire fleet of Star Destroyers. However, this is exactly what the Jedi wanted. They had left the trail encrypted in the message, so Anakin would track them to Dantooine, where they would ambush them in a trap. 30 Jedi were waiting for them, and Anakin and his forces descended upon the warehouse. As they approached, Anakin tore off the door with the Force, his rage boiling as they walked inside. He, alongside Leia and the 10 Inquisitors, stood inside and looked around. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was a dark and uninteresting place, until suddenly, the lights in the warehouse turned on high beam, blinding all of the Inquisitors momentarily, whilst Anakin and Leia closed their eyes but reached out with the Force, as they sensed the 30 Jedi ignite their lightsabers and come towards them, and they realized in that moment that it was a trap. Still blinded, Anakin and Leia ignited their red lightsabers and blocked the initial onslaught. The Inquisitors got their vision back, as Anakin commanded them to fight, to destroy every Jedi here for the Empire. Anakin opened his eyes now, and made eye contact with them, Yoda and Obi-Wan. Rage motivated him, as he fought them himself. He was a completely different man to what he was 18 years ago, and his power was almost doubled. He ignited a second blade, and took them on at the same time. He put them both on the defensive, whilst beside Anakin, Leia fought the best of the Jedi, including Quinlan Vos and Oppo Rancisis. This was her greatest test, and she was performing extraordinary. She disarmed Vos and thrust her saber through his chest and sent him flying back with the Force. Anakin and Leia were doing well, however. With only 10 Inquisitors, they were being cut down one after the other. They had to finish this quickly. Anakin sent lightning both at Yoda and Obi-Wan, who were forced to drop their blades and catch it. They were moving backwards, and Anakin was moving forwards, only moments away from piercing their defenses, until from the side, he saw a flash of green that forced him to stop his lightning, and bring his saber up to block. He didn't know who this young Jedi was. He was still a teenager, but he had Anakin on the back foot. He switched between lightsaber styles effortlessly, which forced Anakin to change his defense style. He attempted to stop this Jedi in place with lightning, but he caught it with one hand and continued advancing. They were equals, and Anakin couldn't believe it. They were locked in a stalemate. The boy's raw, untamed power felt hauntingly familiar. As their blades cracked, Anakin's rage turned into confusion. This was no mere Jedi. Not even Yoda had ever matched him like this. He reached out with a probing tendril of the Force, pushing against the boy's mental shields. Within the light inside of him, he felt an echo. The same presence he had sensed flickering within Padme all those years ago. The same connection that had led him to Leia. The pieces, held apart for 18 years, crashed together in his mind. The age, the power, the familiarity of the boy's eyes. He realized what had happened. He didn't have one child, he had twins. And this was his son, Padme's son. The truth was a shock, as Anakin whispered to Luke as their lightsabers locked, "My son." Leia, sensing the stalemate Anakin was in, cast lightning at Luke. It caught him on the side and sent him flying back with the Force. She jumped on him, ready to thrust her red saber through his heart, but Anakin pulled her back at the last second, telling her to wait. Anakin deactivated his lightsaber and walked forward. He knelt towards Luke, ignoring the battle raging around him. He told Luke to look at him, telling him that he is his son. Luke couldn't believe it. What is the Emperor talking about? Anakin grabbed his hand and reached out with the Force, pouring his consciousness into Luke. Luke realized the connection in an instant. The Force that flowed through Anakin was the same that flowed through Luke. The revelation hit Luke like a star destroyer. All these years, he's been trained by the Jedi to kill not only the Emperor, but his father. Anakin tells Luke that they took him from his mother. They took his sister from him as well. Not for his safety, but to groom him as Anakin's executioner. Anakin told Luke they lied to him. They made him believe he was a monster, but it was the Jedi who tore their family apart. They took him from his mother's arms, hiding him from him, and poisoned him with their dogma. Luke's breath faltered, his mind spinning with the truth. Anakin was right. The Jedi had lied to him, never told him the truth of his family. Anakin reached out his hand and told Luke to join their family, like their mother would have wanted. Together they can turn the galaxy into something worthy of her memory. No more Jedi, no more Sith, only balance, only family. Luke looked at Leia, standing beside her father, her face heavy with hope, and in that moment, he understood. The Force was not calling him to destroy their father, it was calling him home. Luke nodded and embraced his father for the first time. Anakin and Leia turned as they continued in the battle. Luke watched as the Jedi he's grown up with, Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Operancisis were all cut down by Anakin, Leia, and the Inquisitors, and afterwards they left the battlefield together as a family. Together the three of them return to Coruscant, where Anakin announces to the Empire that they have defeated the traitorous rebels and freed his son Luke Skywalker, whom they were keeping hostage. Cheers exploded in the Senate as Anakin looked upon his two children with pride. Over the following months, Anakin taught Luke about the dark side, and his power increased even more. Luke and Leia get on well as siblings, and grow a strong bond to each other. Anakin made Luke in charge of the Imperial Navy, to facilitate their growth and expansion into the Outer Rim. Many years passed, as Luke and Leia both fell in love, starting families of their own, and had many children. Anakin couldn't be more proud of his children, and they were everything he could have wanted. Their family had reunions often on Coruscant, as Anakin looked upon them, knowing that when he passes into the afterlife, the Empire will be in good hands, and the Skywalker family will lead the galaxy for 1,000 generations.
Thanks for watching everyone. Once again, don't miss our Black Friday sale over at Fantasy Sabers, where with every Saber order, we're giving away a free Chosen One Deluxe. The best NeoPixel Sabers on the market, so don't miss out.